The man didn't have a sign outside his shop, no website, no social media presence, no listing in any directory that a normal person would find by searching. You only knew about him because someone told you, and that someone had been told by someone else, and somewhere at the beginning of that chain was a person who had stumbled into a building on the edge of a small town and walked out 3 hours later, unable to explain what they had seen. His name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is what he kept inside. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with wooden crates, straw packed around glass panels the size of a dining room table. Lead came soldered in patterns that no modern glazier could identify from any historical catalogue. Colours that had no modern equivalent, not because the pigments were lost, but because the glass itself was made using a process that glassmakers today cannot fully replicate, even with electron microscopy and century-old manufacturing notes. Every single piece came from a church. Every single church had been demolished. And every single one of those demolitions happened between 1870 and 1920, during a 50-year window that researchers in a growing community of independent historians have come to call the erasure. You're watching this because something doesn't add up to you. Maybe it was the architecture. Maybe it was a photograph of a building from 1870 that looked like it belonged in a civilization 500 years more advanced than what the history books describe. Maybe it was the mud. Maybe it was the fact that thousands of structures from what the official record calls the mid-19th century are buried to their first floor windows in sediment that no flood, no gradual accumulation, no reasonable geological explanation can account for in a single human lifetime. Whatever brought you here, you already know the shape of the question. This video is going to show you a piece of the answer that sits behind glass. Subscribe before you go further. This channel documents what the official record leaves out, and this story has pieces that connect to everything else we've covered here. Hit subscribe, leave a comment telling me which demolished building in your region you want us to look at next, and let's continue. If you've never considered that the buildings we call 19th century churches might not have been built by the civilization that used them, stay with this. Because the antique dealer didn't just sell glass, he documented what happened when that glass was positioned correctly, in the right light, at the right time of year. And what it projected onto the walls behind it wasn't saints, it wasn't scripture, it was geometry. Repeating, precise, mathematically encoded geometry that corresponded to no known Christian iconographic tradition, but matched, almost exactly, the architectural proportions found in hundreds of structures now buried under cities that, according to the official timeline, shouldn't exist at all. Before 1880, stained glass was not manufactured the way modern glass is made. The dominant process used in structures demolished across North America and Europe during this period was mouth-blown cylinder glass, sometimes called antique glass, not as a marketing term but as a literal description of origin. The glass was produced by gathering molten material onto a blowpipe, inflating it into a cylinder, cutting it open and flattening it in a kiln. The resulting panels had striations, bubbles and density variations that modern float glass cannot replicate. But the dealer wasn't selling it for its texture. He was selling it for its transmission behavior, the way it bent, split and rebroadcast incoming light in patterns that were not random and did not correspond to any decorative intention that the historical glazing literature can account for. A researcher who spent 2 days in that shop with a photometer and a notebook described what she witnessed. She positioned a panel from a demolished church in Ohio against a south-facing window at 2 in the afternoon. The panel was approximately 18 inches by 30 inches, deep cobalt at the borders with a central medallion in amber and green. Within 6 minutes of direct sunlight contact, the far wall, 14 feet away, displayed a projection covering nearly 40 square feet. The projection was not a distorted version of the glass design. It was something else entirely. A nested series of hexagons intersected by lines radiating from a central point at angles she measured at 30, 60 and 90 degrees. She measured the projection 4 times. The geometry did not waver. It did not shift with the movement of clouds. It remained stable, locked as though the glass was not simply transmitting light, but organizing it. She was not the first person to document this. She was just the first person who published what she found. The demolition wave is the part of this story that most people find hardest to confront, not because it is difficult to understand, but because understanding it requires accepting that something coordinated happened across an enormous geographic area within a very compressed timeline. Between 1870 and 1920, an estimated 4,000 church structures in North America were demolished, condemned, or dismantled. The official explanations are consistent: population shifts, structural deterioration, religious consolidation, urban redevelopment. These explanations are not entirely false, but they are incomplete in a way that becomes visible the moment you start looking at what was replaced and what was not. Structures that were demolished were overwhelmingly the ones built, or more accurately, inherited, before 1860. The replacement structures were uniformly simpler: flat facades, narrow windows with clear or minimally coloured glass, ceilings that did not exceed 40 feet. The acoustic and optical properties of the original structures were not preserved, not approximated, not referenced in any replacement design. They were erased. And the reason that matters is because those properties are not ones that a mid-19th century congregation would have had the engineering knowledge to produce from scratch. The dealer had been collecting since the 1960s, active during the last major wave of urban renewal demolitions, a second erasure that later researchers would map against the first. In just over 40 years of buying salvage from wrecking crews and the occasional private sale from a family that had carried a panel out before a building came down, he assembled what one appraiser described as the most significant collection of pre-1880 ecclesiastical glass in private hands anywhere in the world. He did not price it as an art collection, a legacy project, or a gallery. He priced it as evidence. Not all of his customers understood what they were buying. Some came for the colour. Some had read about him in small press restoration architecture publications. But a portion, described in the one recorded interview that exists of him, a 90-minute cassette tape made by a student researcher in 2003, came specifically because they had heard about the projections, the geometry on the walls, the light that didn't behave the way it should. He told the student researcher that the first time he noticed it, he thought there was something wrong with his eyesight. He had positioned a panel from a church in upstate New York, demolished 1887, against the window in his workshop to assess. The lead came. The afternoon sun came in at an angle, and on the floor, not the wall, the floor, a pattern appeared that stopped him mid-movement. He described it as a wheel, not a rose window wheel, not a decorative motif. A wheel with spokes at intervals he couldn't immediately calculate, surrounded by a ring, surrounded by another ring, the proportions so clean they looked machined. He got down on his hands and knees and looked at it for a long time. Then he got a ruler. The spokes were spaced at 22.5 degrees, 16 of them perfectly even, projecting from a centre point. The outer ring sat at a distance corresponding to the radius of the centre, multiplied by a number he recognized immediately, not from a geometry textbook, but from a book about proportional systems used in the large civic buildings of the late Tartarian period. A period the mainstream record does not acknowledge by that name, but that an increasing body of physical evidence suggests was a genuine civilization operating at a technological level the official 19th century timeline cannot accommodate. That number was phi, the golden ratio, 1.618. He measured 7 more panels over the following weeks. 6 produced structured geometric projections. 5 of those 6 incorporated phi in at least one measurable ratio. He began keeping a notebook. By the time the student researcher sat across from him in 2003, he had filled 19 notebooks with measurements, paginaire sketches, and cross-references to architectural studies describing the same proportional systems in the foundations, arches, and window placements of buildings across 3 continents, Buildings the official record attributed to local craftsmen working from European ecclesiastical traditions, but that the physical evidence increasingly suggested were inherited, not designed. Inherited from what is the question that the Tartaria research community has been working to answer for 30 years. The working model that the physical evidence fits most consistently is this. The civilization that left these structures behind was older than the one history says built them, more technically sophisticated, and it understood something about the relationship between geometry, light, and the human nervous system, that the civilization which inherited its buildings did not preserve. The 50-year demolition wave that removed 4,000 of those structures from North America was not an accident of urban development. It was a clearance. The glass survived because it was portable. Demolishing a panel of stained glass without leaving evidence is nearly impossible. What happened in enough cases to supply a 40-year collection was intact removal. Into crates, into barns, into the back rooms of salvage dealers, and eventually into one man's workshop where the afternoon sun came in at an angle that made the floor show things it wasn't supposed to show. The structures themselves were gone. Foundations poured over, built over, in some cases buried under sediment events that mudflood researchers have been documenting since the early 2000s. What the light showed was not mystical in the way that word is usually used. It was precise, measurable, repeatable under consistent conditions. The geometry that appeared when these panels were exposed to direct sunlight at specific angles was not noise. It was signal. Consistent across panels from different demolished churches in different states from different decades. Consistent in a way that could only mean the panels were made according to a shared design system. One that predated the congregations that used them, predated the official construction dates of the buildings they came from, and predated the civilization the mainstream record says built those buildings. The dealer died in 2011. His collection was dispersed. Some went to a restoration architect in Vermont who continued his documentation work. Some went to private buyers. A portion was purchased by a representative of a foundation whose public mission is the preservation of American religious heritage, but whose actual acquisition practices, based on what several former employees have described, involve removing documented items from public record and placing them in climate-controlled storage, inaccessible to researchers. The last known public presentation of 2 panels from the collection happened in 2014 at a small conference on pre-industrial building technology in a rented hall in Pennsylvania. The presenter was the Vermont architect. He brought 2 panels, positioned them against the south window at 2 in the afternoon, and let the projection speak. 43 people watched geometry appear on a white wall that had no business being there. Watched it hold steady for 90 minutes. Watched it shift incrementally as the sun moved, while the internal proportions, the phi ratios, the radian intervals, the nested structures, remained locked. Nobody there offered a complete technical explanation that accounted for all of what they saw. Several people took photographs. At least 2 of those photographs circulated in the research community for a few years before disappearing from every platform they had been posted to. The glass is still out there. Some of it is in antique shops right now, misidentified, priced as decorative salvage by people who don't know what they have. Some of it is in barns, leaning against garage walls in the dark, in towns where the afternoon sun doesn't come through the right window at the right angle. And some of it is in the hands of people who know exactly what they have, and have been waiting for enough people to ask the right questions before they show what the light shows. You're one of those people now. The question you're supposed to be asking isn't who built these churches. It's what they were actually built for, because a building optimized to project precise phi ratio geometry through encoded glass panels at specific solar angles was not built for prayer. It was built for something the civilization that inherited it no longer understood, something the civilization that demolished it did not want you to think about, something that 43 people in a rented hall in Pennsylvania saw on a white wall in 2014 and could not explain and did not forget. The same proportional encoding appears in the ironwork of demolished train stations, in the tile patterns of civic bathhouses torn down during the same 50-year window, in the acoustic geometry of concert halls that no longer exist. The clearance was comprehensive, but it was not complete, because glass is hard to destroy quietly, and one man spent 40 years making sure it didn't disappear entirely. Subscribe. There is more of this. There is a great deal more of this, and the more of it you see, the harder it becomes to accept the version of history that required all of it to be removed.